I don't know why I wear a bowling shirt, but
Well, at least you're not wearing bowling shoes.
yeah, that would be a whole different story.
We'd have to do an audio only for that one.
That's why I'm grateful for David bringing all his tech.
I know,
Because
this is
I'm
fancy.
a one camera setup.
Oh,
I'm
really?
basic.
No, this is
Yeah.
fancy.
Cool. Thanks for sitting down. We're good. We're recording.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Thank you for sitting down with us.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So George, fine. What we're talking about, basically any topic you want, and the goal of the conversation is just to explore your reasoning for believing what you believe.
Right.
And yeah, did you have something in mind that you want to chat about?
So, there's a prompt in front of us behind the cameras that says, how do we know what's true? I would kind of want to explore morality in that sense because I'm an avid goer of the philosophy club here at the school. That was one of the most recent topics. And as with any school of thought and just approaching philosophy, of course, we did not come to an answer.
Right.
So, I don't know, I think in this conversation we can explore that and see where that goes from there. I'll pose my immediate perspective on that,
Sure.
in that I don't think there's an objective sense of morality, but in some weird contradictory way there is, and we can explore that as the conversation envelops.
Sure.
We were talking a little bit off camera prior to this about absurdism and existentialism,
Okay.
and a lot of the recent literature that I've been reading has kind of led me to that perspective. So I guess for me, dismantling nihilism is kind of an important thing for me as a personal, development sort of thing, but from the get-go, we'll talk about morality and then go from there.
Sure. Okay. So the claim of that there is no objective morality. We'll start there.
Okay.
And maybe we'll start with definitions. Can you go over what you mean by morality?
Okay. So I'll start with objective and then go
Sure.
from there, because that, of course, is more so the focus.
Okay.
Objectivism meaning that there is one sole truth, a sole perspective, and a sole, collection of principles, and I don't want to necessarily say virtues because that's a loaded word, but a sole set of principles and, I guess, guidelines to dictating what is true. That gets caught up in all sorts of different things, and of course that is the prompt that you guys posed, but objectivism being a sole truthful state of affairs and a sole truthful state of just, being. And when it comes to morality, morality has a lot of different, definitions, as you are probably familiar with. I sort of view it as a guide of leading principles to, I guess, what is right in the world and what is the most, I guess, virtuous. Unfortunately, again, this gets caught up in a million different definitions.
Yeah, for sure. We can get down the rabbit hole.
I think it's important that we define everything first. So, when it comes to morality, really just a leading set of principles and laws being insular of the legality sense, that dictate the best way of living and the best course of action to take in situations and what is right. Right, obviously, is a very flimsy term because right can fall, victim to subjectivism, which is the contrary of what objectivism is, and that gets into really rich discussion as well. But objective morality, that being what is the right thing to do at every single point of time, does not exist, because otherwise it'd get a lot worse, and I think the world would envelop into a lot more chaos than having the bending of rules and having the bending of perspectives based on subjective circumstances.
So you said that there isn't always going to be a single right thing to do.
Yes.
Is there sometimes?
Immediately, when this question was posed prior, I went in with yes. I went in with the idea that there are firm, I'm a man of axiom. I certainly do have things that I stand firm on, but I recognize that'll bend. As a college student, as with many, we're super politically active right now. And I devote myself much more to ideology right now than I did prior, and I'm sure that'll change with time. I think experience guides a lot of that. But when it comes to morality, when it comes to what is doing what is right, unfortunately, that does change. For example, murder. Okay. There's a very specific reason why we reframe it based on the context of when that execution of somebody else's life took place. If I were to sit here right now and to a person sitting behind the camera and shoot him in the head for no good reason, maybe I have my reasons, maybe I have my inspirations. If I were to do that, that would not be justified. You know what I mean? I'd go to jail, I'd serve in prison for probably my life, and that would be it. Now, say, for example, the individual standing behind the camera instead was charging me with a knife. Okay, this goes down to self-defense. Okay, yeah, I'd be a lot more permitted. Was it to protect myself? Yes. Was it to protect my life and everybody around me life and things of that nature? Of course, and that makes it right. But at the end of the day, it's still murder. But we weigh that differently, and we do that for a purpose, because otherwise it's impractical. Otherwise, it really, you know, if we were to stand on a very, very firm principle that murder is wrong, I would, you know, undergo punishment, and I would undergo, you know, the consequence of this being a super wrong thing, even if I was justified. You know what I mean? So
what I'm hearing is that it is context dependent.
extremely.
Okay. And is that what makes it not objective?
You know, that's a complicated, it gets complicated fast, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because of course you need a set of objective principles to guide contextual situations, because otherwise there is no sense of right and wrong. But I do think instead of it being completely haywire, there's a realm of flimsiness and I guess bend that we permit these institutions and that we permit these perspectives to have. So, you know, as you were mentioning can you restate what you said? I'm sorry, I got lost in
I
my
was
own
thinking
verbiage.
like, I guess I'll rephrase it to say, if you were to remove the variations and make it a concrete situation of this person in this situation, they're not doing anything wrong.
Right.
To murder them on the spot.
Right.
Would that be objectively immoral?
To remove those guidelines, I guess.
To remove the abstractness of it, so to speak. To make the context clear. So if you have a particular situation, rather than murder in the abstract, but murder in a certain case.
Right. Yeah. You're going to inevitably need a sense of objectivity. You know. Unfortunately, you know, and I obviously am a little bit scatterbrained at the present.
No worries.
There are a variety of things that will separate, I guess, the moral consequence of it and the legal consequence of it.
Sure.
If we were to pursue the strictly moral argument to be had, morality lends itself to context, unfortunately, and legality is a little less flimsy in that respect as to why we have an unjust legal system or an unjust sense of justice in a lot of different circumstances. Morality, given that every individual has an individual moral compass and an individual sense of perspective, that opens it up to a whole broad, you know, new range of approaches. And that is why I think we have a lot of institutions that pervade that. Okay. We have organized religion, which the conversation prior was very interested in discussing that. We have the rule of law and a government's view of that and how that is invoked, whether that be through power or coercion or, you know, persuasion or other methods of, you know, instituting influence. And at the end of the day, we also have that individual level of morality that I invoked prior that, you know, I've done immoral things. I'm sure everybody here has. You know, that's not an impossible declaration. But overall, I would determine myself to be a moral person because I weigh things as they come. And I do invoke a sense of subjectivism that if I were to live with an objective basis, everything would be contradictory. You know what I mean? So this is a little abstract. I apologize if I'm talking circles right now, but hopefully you understand where I'm coming from in that. It makes it's tricky.
Yeah. As you say, it gets complicated fast. Yep. And we wait for the skateboard to go by. But
I know that guy too. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. That's funny. When we think about the goal for morality, you mentioned that morality was about what was right or correct.
Yes.
Is there a goal associated with that?
Of like a goal of morality?
Like to make something right or correct, is there an objective? A different right. I have a different meaning for the word objective there, right. So forgive me for using that again.
It's okay.
But yeah, the goal of like, how do you know if something, even given an individual's morality,
Right.
like take your own individual morality,
Right.
do you have a,
Is there a reason for it?
yes,
I appreciate that question. Yes.
okay,
But that is also why, of course, the ends justifying the means shift that relationship. But to answer your question, it really depends on where you really subscribe into the point of our existence therein and really what you derive your purpose and pleasure from. I myself am a subscriber of care ethics, meaning that it's sort of a branch of collectivism and it's sort of a branch of utilitarianism, whereas we want to maximize the amount of pleasure that everybody receives and minimize that level of suffering.
okay,
Utilitarianism gets, I don't want to get bogged down in the philosophy of it, I know neither do you, but at the end of the day, what brings the most, I don't want to say success, but I guess just the best standard of living for everybody around me, including myself. However, I don't necessarily give in to the essence of the individual that a lot of Western liberal dogma really proclaims. I think the interpretations of it are, of course, very flimsy and change with time. But at the present, at least, I very much subscribe to the fact that I am bound to you as much as you are to me. I don't really believe that I should maximize my self-interest more than you, or the other way around. I think that as a collective, we really receive the most benefit and we really receive the most pleasure because through that method of collectivization and through that method of really collectivizing either, I don't want to talk in a labor sense, but just living, we maximize everybody. And of course, there are sacrifices to be had in that. We especially in the West, we love to talk about how much we give up in that relationship. But for me, morality is sort of a way of espousing that and a way of guaranteeing that. So, for example, I was taught from a very, very young age that stealing is wrong. Stealing is wrong, one, because you're going to get punished, but the way my dad proposed it to me and the way that my dad and family taught me was that it's wrong because you are taking from somebody else and you are taking prospective success or prospective pleasure or prospective just well-being away from somebody else. You're detracting that. We're in the DC area right now. I take the metro often. A lot of my friends, they jump the turnstile. And of course, this is a classic tale. You know what I mean? You don't really have to pay. Of course, it's a free service by proxy. But if everybody were to hypothetically jump that turnstile, the DC metro system would go broke, and we'd fail to really have a great means of public transportation.
Right.
You know what I mean? So for me, it's a matter of securing prosperity and just securing peace for everybody, including myself, because I feel as if I fall into that realm of everybody. That's a really long-winded way to say that I think the right thing to do is to do, what brings the best for everyone around me.
Yeah, so
and I
for
think
your
morality guides
individual
that.
morality, that's sort of the goal.
Yes.
Is this care ethics practice.
Mm-hmm.
So given that goal, if we were to agree to that, and I'm not saying that everybody has to agree to that,
Absolutely.
but if we were, or if I have Mo over here, if Mo comes over and says that she agrees with that as the goal,
Mm-hmm.
could we then look at an individual action, like jumping the turnstile or murdering this person? Could we then make an objective decision as to whether that gets you closer to the goal or not?
My only gripe with that is because, we want to determine that objective means to an end and that objective decision making to really inspire this objective reality at the end of it. Everything is a product of its sum. Everything is a product of, like, my life right here, me sitting right here is the product of me meandering around campus, talking to a preacher prior to this and everything of that sort. Unfortunately, it does fall a victim to the context that we were most recently discussing and the fact that, without this sort of bending of perspectives and bending of rules and bending of, I guess, what is right and what is wrong, we cannot necessarily declare an objective what is and what is right and wrong. Okay, that made no sense. Let me ponder on this a little bit more. If you want to talk
Yeah, no
a little
problem.
bit
I
to
mean,
guide that.
yeah, and it's no rush. I think I appreciate the reflection. I mean, that's a goal,
That,
stated goal.
which I respect. Thank you both.
Absolutely. I think it makes me think about like if you have this morality, how would you ever make a decision if,
Everything is contextual.
yeah,
Yeah. Because I think for me, at least in this current perspective that I have, that is a really good question. Because at the end of the day, I do, we mentioned principles, and we mentioned axioms, and we mentioned hard, firm truths. For me, that hard, firm truth is that, I guess, perspective of morality that I invoked earlier, in the school of care ethics and in the school of what is doing right and wrong, that being securing prosperity, pursuing good being, and I guess a secure and stable existence. That is the ends. And I think that is the objective sense of morality that I guess I'm trying to describe. However, morality and action and decision making are two different things. Action and decision making being one. Those are two very different things. And that comes back to the old adage, and I guess, philosophical debate is whether or not the ends justify the means.
right.
And frankly, that is why I have a very hard time declaring an objective morality, given that the means are never going to be objective. You know what I mean? The means will never necessarily be declared to be right or wrong.
We can't ignore them.
We can't. We can't. Because at the end of the day, as I said, everything is a product of its sum. And they're like, we look at, because I'm a student of government and politics, I look at the way governments influence their populations. I just came from a class that really focuses on contemporary Chinese politics. And, in Chinese history, you have, Mao Zedong, who did these awful, awful things. You know what I mean? You had the Great Leap Forward, which killed millions of lives. You have the Cultural Revolution. You have all these really great and grand famines that are still being talked about to this day. However, and I'm not justifying this. Please do not remotely correlate this to be that. But you look now, and barring the antagonistic relationship that the West and America and China have with each other, you have one of the most successful and prosperous nations on earth right now. However, my sense of morality, a lot of people died. That's unfortunately and very truly screwed up. But there's cost, and there's cost to everything. And do we, as I guess from you, and this isn't necessarily a question, it's more rhetorical, but you are more than welcome to say that. Can you point at a country and say, unequivocally so, that they're evil? I mean, is it, you can look at history and certainly make that declaration. I mean, Nazi Germany is an unequivocally evil thing. But generally speaking, at least in the contemporary context, and as we move with the passage of time, can you point at something and say that is wrong no matter what?
Right.
I mean, can you do that, frankly? And I'm not asking you to take a stance one way or the other, but just in an abstract sense. I mean, are we really capable as people who think on the subject able to do that, given that context differs with, so much within?
Yeah.
If you want to say yes or no to that, because
yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that that is getting back to the nature of the claim about whether there's objective morality. And so it comes back to the question of, well, can we say, given the goal of what's best for most people,
right,
is that getting you closer to that goal, right?
Yeah. I think the goal is certainly a truth, is certainly something that we strive for, but in our decision making and in our process of getting to that goal, the goal itself changes. Like, for example, I'm hungry. Okay, I go into a store, I hold it up, I steal a loaf of bread, I eat that loaf of bread. I'm satisfied now. I'm justified to myself because my hunger is met, and therefore all is right within the universe. However, I inflicted harm upon another person, I inflicted harm upon an organization or corporation, and I stole from that point forward. And at the end goal being satisfying my hunger, if I have different means of doing that rather than holding a store up and stealing a loaf of bread, I had that means of pursuing that, and I had the means of, I guess, not necessarily doing that. And at the end of the day, these things get weighed differently, even though my goal is met. That example was in its complete infancy in my brain, so that made no sense.
No, I get what you're saying. I mean, it's still coming back to,
whether or not there's an objective goal to be had. The goal of our conversation really being morality, but the goal of just truth and the goal of, I guess, what is right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That goal changes. That goal is unfortunately subject to change as time progresses and as conditions change and as context, is ever so fluid. But I think as long as we sort of, I don't want to say check off boxes and check off, a bullet list of what is right and what is wrong, as long as the majority of those conditions are met, as in therein being the least amount of harm inflicted, the most amount, I don't want to get all utilitarian here because I let the cameras know I don't subscribe to it in full, but the most amount of pleasure and I guess general satisfaction is met, things of that nature, as long as those outweigh, I guess, the costs, not to say everything is CBA, I think that kind of answers where I'm getting at there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that this is probably a good place to stop. I don't have any questions coming up to me, but is there any other things you want to add or ask, or what did you think of the conversation?
No, I found it very enriching.
Cool.
I certainly had to question my own beliefs because I do that as a hobby, so
Right.
my mind is never rest, God willing.
Yeah.
I did want to pursue, I guess, when we were mentioning, what was it? We brought up the example of what is right and what is wrong. How exactly do you think, and you don't have to espouse your own beliefs because I don't know how much you really are willing to do that on your own channel, but how much of that, I guess, is subject to change from your own perspective?
How much of my beliefs are subject to?
Yes.
Oh,
Do you believe these are
all
like
of them
permanently permeable things, or do you have
Yes.
things that you stand upon to?
Yeah, I don't think I have any beliefs that would be uncompromising, that I don't think is subject to revision.
And as moral humans, and of course this is from the perspective of from us both, that we have things that we know that are always subject to change. But if we're going to dictate morality to be an end goal that is sort of objective, because that is what we were trying to deconstruct here, do you think that's inherently immoral then? Because, to have a principle that you say, oh, well, that's always changing, you know what I mean? Would that be immoral by, I guess, by virtue?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I think having things be possible to change doesn't mean that they're fluid and blowing in the wind.
Right.
I think that you can have piles of evidence, and you just keep piling evidence, and it become bigger and bigger, and then you get a big mountain. It's not to say that mountain's never going to move, but it would take a lot to move it.
Right.
So
I really appreciate that breakdown of that, because that kind of addresses my major concern is like I said, I mean, I came in here with telling you that I do have things that I stand upon, and I do have very firm principles and axioms that I permit myself to, but sort of, I guess, not falling victim to various influences and not falling victim to this complete devotion to subjectivity.
Right.
It's a very difficult process.
Yeah.
Because I'm a transfer student. I took an ethics course at my previous institution, a community college, which I will tell you right now very much differs in environment from a state college.
I love community colleges.
Oh, it's amazing, and it's very much a culture change, very much all sorts of different things. But in this course, when you learn about ethics, and I'm very much interested in getting into development work and international development. You really do have to weigh, subjectivism versus objectivism. And this is why this is such a very rich prompt, because, there's so many different approaches to so many different things. We as Americans very much like to get caught up in, this is our one truth, this is the one right thing that we can do. Right. And I don't know, it's very beautiful to really develop that conversation as we go, but we're nearing our time. So.
Cool. No, well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
appreciate
as well.
it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. All right, have a good rest of your day.
Well, thank you guys for this.
Yeah, thanks for participating.
Did anyone else want to step up for a short
go
conversation?
for
It could be as short or as long as you like, so.
I just wanted to say hi, Dr. Diamond.
Oh, shoot. Hey, oh my God. Good to see you.
Long,
yeah, that's.
I saw you sitting here, and I was like, oh my gosh, I had to
This
go to
is
class, but I had to come
this
back.
is my pandemic hobby.
Oh,
Yeah.
I remember you sent me the link.
The link.
And I did look at it while I was in Delaware. Yeah.
That's too
So
cool.
that's excellent.
You know I'm wearing flannel because of you.
Yeah.
I took it up.